So, this episode is actually going to cover grief and anxiety. Kind of two big topics, I think, focusing on the holidays and focusing on my own personal health, on my own personal mental health, as I hope all of you are during this time of stress, during the time of. Feels like it's definitely the epitome of what a winter should be. It's filled with a lot of endings, but I think we should know that every ending is part of a new beginning. So stick around and we'll discuss. I had a friend that she kind of mentioned, she said that it seems like everybody's in a funk right now. And there is definitely something to be said about energy and connection. Because it does seem like, at least for me, what I notice is that there's always usually a bulk of people that are in a funk. It's not like, you always have that one friend that's kind of a pessimist, but it's not a consistent thing. It's not, I mean, it's a consistent thing with them, but not with everybody. I think one of the primary things is what our vices are. I've always kind of expressed that you should know your vices and you should always use your vices and not let your vices use you. And there's definitely something to be said of discipline. I feel like it's something in practice. Wouldn't necessarily say that I'm a very disciplined person, but I think the idea of knowing, I guess, is probably half the battle, right? Like, that there are things that you need to do. You know that you need to work out more. You need to keep in touch with friends and family more. You know that you need to push towards whatever that particular thing is that you want, you know, talk about it, put it out there. I saw somewhere once that they said that you're not supposed to talk about your future plans. You don't want to tell people because it gives you a false sense of accomplishment. So you're telling people that you want to do this, you want to do that. And I definitely did this a lot when I was in Denver. I still to this day, I'm constantly have these ideas, but for whatever reason, it's like I can't pull the trigger. And I think most of it, for me anyway, is monetary value. Monetary things always scare the crap out of me. Like anytime I got to spend extra money on something, which is really funny because I don't have a problem spending money on food or drink or friends or creating those moments of enjoyment. But I do have a hard time trying to put money away to create more business avenues, which is kind of strange. I mean, lately I've been a lot more focused as far as reining in those emotions and those feelings and trying to utilize them in a way that's going to actually facilitate the progress of myself as a human being, and as my future goals actually extend throughout. One of the things that I wanted to discuss about anxiety is how it kind of creeps up on people. And I think when it's compounded with the feelings of dread, the feelings of our mortality, I think people tend to withdraw quite a bit. I think there are some people that really probably are looking for the end. And then there's some people that aren't necessarily looking for the end, but probably don't shoo it away, right? Like they're not scared of death. They're not necessarily like trying to do death defying things, but they probably wouldn't care if they got hit by a car, like, and I think like for me, I'm not necessarily like scared of death. Like I could be content in any event, but I definitely feel like I've got a lot to do. And I feel like I want time to do those things, which is something that I think A lot of us do, right? I think the anxiety comes from feeling unaccomplished in the things that we're trying to create or the things we're trying to do, and then recognizing the mortality. And then the mortality of our existence is compounded with our depression, our distress, and that is the piece that we focus on. And then that's where we fear the future, right? Some of us fear our own death. There's people out there that are scared to die, and there's people out there that are dreading everybody dying, their friends dying. And I think it's kind of, and I would probably be safe to assume, I didn't pull any numbers up on this, but I'd be safe to assume that a majority of people, probably in the 70s or 80% is, I bet. Again, I'm just kind of guessing, just ballparking. If you have the actual numbers, feel free to send me a message or comment. That would be kind of interesting to dig into at a later date. But I think that a lot of people don't think about, or a lot of people think about death of other people. And I think death in general scares them more, a majority of the people more than, and their own death scares them more than they think about how to use their days. I heard a good quote from Ryan Holiday. He was actually quoting Seneca. So Seneca says, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all we invested in. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last by death's final constraint to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. So it is, we are not given a short life, but we make it short. And we are not ill supplied, but wasteful of it. Life is long if you know how to use it." So that is Seneca on his, sounds like it's an essay he wrote called "Life is Long If You Know How to Use It," or "The Shortness of Life," I guess. That is where I think a lot of people are in their current existence. And then when people pass, I think a big chunk of what we deal with when a loved one is passed is we deal with grief as a form of reconciling our regret for not being there, for not showing when we needed to, and for not, blaming ourselves for it. And some of it probably is true blame. Like there's probably some blame of that you can carry on your shoulders. I think that's a burden that we probably, based on societal woes and the things that we do in society and how we function within our society, there are probably ways that we could be better as a society. Then there are those things that we do not have control over. There are those things that we blame ourselves for and that we want to blame others for. That in itself is the anger, the frustration, and the perpetual grief that we carry with us. And depending on how long we can get around those emotions and when we can reconcile and forgive ourselves for the things that we have control over, and then we can reconcile and can forgive those that we blame for whatever issue they have, then you can begin to heal. And then you can begin to hope. I think a lot of people tend to carry grief on them. And I do believe that, like, depending on the person, there is something like we don't grieve the same for our household pets as we do for, our children, our parents, our siblings, and especially more so a husband and wife, a mother and child. I think One that recently personally dealing with is my grandma passed away, and I watched my mom go to Mexico and deal with a lot of that, and she went down there to she had it in her. She had to be, she always had to be there. Like, she was visiting a lot, like she was trying to put in effort to go see my grandma a lot. And I think that just kind of from some of the stories she told me, there's a lot of you can see the emotions, the varying emotions that go through everybody when somebody passes away. And I think there are people that try to be the hero, I guess, or the stalwart or the stoic or whoever, whoever it is, the person that wants to show the least emotion, especially, you get that from men. I remember when my mother-in-law passed away, pretty emotional person. I think I've opened myself up pretty good. Like, I've got all the if you believe in chakras or anything, I got all those chakras opened up. I think I got a couple that are still kind of isolated, but for the most part, I am a very emotional human being. More so that I think I've recognized my mortality, more so that I feel I've died and this is my life. So I think that or at least I try. I think obviously anything in practice is always just practice, you know. But I do believe that the way that we should recognize death is that it is a thing. It's a constant. Doesn't go away. I mean, it might in the future. That's another podcast for sure. But it doesn't go away. It's an inevitability. You can't change it. You can't force a change on it. You can't. And then depending, your circumstances, I think this is why it's so important for us to live while we're living. You know, there's no for sure on what's going to happen on the other side. Depending if you're Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or I think the fact that there's so many different reasons or so many different things that we think is going to happen just kind of shows how little we actually know. And I think you have to be able to know that if this is all we've got, then we should probably do the best with all we've got. Make those moments the best moments while we have them and try to address those things. And by no means am I telling people that if you're grieving, take your time to heal, take your time to process, take your time, especially like people that are dealing with a sick family member and it's a long death, and, I can't imagine the stress. I had a former coworker buddy of mine. They had a family member who was sick, and they dealt with his passing, and then immediately after he passed, it's like, I think if I remember right, it was like 2 or 3 years they dealt with his illness, and then right after that the mom got sick. The other half of that couple got sick, and I can't even, for the children of those two parents, like, and it's not like they're not like, especially if you have like active family members, like people that are involved in your grandchildren, your children, they're, everywhere, they're trying to do everything and everyone, be with everyone and try to care for those people. I think it makes it even harder. And then I don't believe there's any instance in our entire lives that will make us turn into that quivering child again than when we lose a parent. I still see, you know, family members in their 50s and 60s calling for their mommies and daddies, just because they miss them so much. So take your time to heal. everybody needs to take their time to heal for that kind of stuff. I saw this story from a Facebook friend. It says the three monks. The devil appeared to three monks and said to them, "If I gave you power to change something from the past, what would you change?" The first of them, the great apostolic fervor, replied, "I would prevent you from making Adam and Eve fall into sin so that humanity could not turn away from God." The second, a man full of mercy, said to him, "I would prevent you from God, and you will condemn yourself eternally." The third of them was the simplest, and instead of responding to the tempter, he got on his knees, made the sign of the cross, and prayed, saying, "Lord, free me from the temptation of what could be and was not." The devil, giving a raucous cry, shuddering with pain, vanished. The other two, surprised, said to him, "Brother, why have you responded like this?" He replied, "First, we must never dialogue with the devil. Second, nobody in the world has the power to change the past. And third, Satan's interest was not to prove our virtue, but to trap us in the past, so that we neglect the present, the only time God gives us his grace, and we can cooperate with him to fulfill his will. Of all the demons, the one that catches the most men and prevents them from being happy is that of what could have been and what was not. The past is left to the mercy of God and the future to his providence. Only the present is in our hands. Live in the moment." Man, that last part, of all the demons, the one that catches the most men and prevents them from being happy is that of what could have been and was not. That is, if that isn't like the biggest slam on regret and how regret can hinder your healing, can hinder your process of moving on, can hinder your ability to just be in the moment and just be a human, just be a fulfilling person of God. I mean, if you look at it like that, like, and you got to kind of step away when you think of God, think of consciousness, think of your inner personhood, your inner enlightened self, the part of you that recognizes that you are more than just a bag of bones aging on the timeline of the God's design. Like, that's what you have to, when when you fulfill your God's duty, when you touch the Godhead and you understand that you can be bigger than the physical and step beyond into the conscious or even spiritual, if you want to say spiritual. But I know as a logical creature, there's a lot that different. In fact, I've been talking with the Jimmy James show. We'll probably do a crossover event or a feature event. Well, I'll have him on the show and we'll discuss religion a little bit. But aside from that, point being is that the biggest demon that you can wrestle with is the demon of regret. Trying to convince yourself that you can change something that you actually could not change. And trying to put yourself in a place in time that is outside of the current moment. And maybe make better and stronger connections. Make better and stronger moves, I guess. Emotions, situations, creations. There's so many different ways to kind of look at it. But I do think that when we are dealing with grief, maybe we hold ourselves into account that we should never forget that person, or to forget that person is something bad. I remember there's a was it Coco? I think Disney. Like, you had to remember them for them to exist in the realm of the dead. And if they didn't exist, they would just disappear. But nobody knew where they went. They just disappeared. So that's kind of a a weird way to look at it, because especially like the lineage of, because that means you die a second time, right? Like, because everybody is going to be forgotten on the timeline. Like, there's very few people that are remembered. When you think of the hundreds of thousands of people that have died, or millions, billions that have died since we started recording data, like all those people in all those little towns in the Bible that existed that are not there anymore, you think anybody remembers that dude that was the neighbor to Joseph and Mary? Or, the servant that worked for, the Caesars? Like, nobody remembers those guys. They're not even in the history books. They're gone. So I think, even if you had an afterlife that existed in that particular realm, you would still die a second time. It's an inevitability. Certain families would probably carry the traditions a little bit better, and you would probably live a little bit longer, but you would ultimately die again. And maybe this is the lesson, is that the soul, as it is in this plane, is finite. As it exists here today, with the moments that you're given to create the things that you want to see in this world, and the truths that you want to get out there, and the realities that you want to create for the people that are in your life, the things you want them to feel, the things you want them to hear, your overall happiness. Like, those are the things that I think we need to pay attention to. But as always, I'm talking to myself first, since my lips are closest to my ears, and I have 2 ears, and my hearing is not that bad. I know that I'm talking to myself first, and I'm trying to make myself feel those words before I project these words upon my listeners. So thank you. My name's Eddie. You're listening to the TBD Network. Working on a lot of new shows. Working on the... still messing with the name, but the philosophical podcast. It'll probably be a lot more of this. In fact, the first episodes are covering the 48 Laws of Power. And... looking forward to that. I did realize my hiatus, I lost privilege on a lot of the big providers, the podcast providers. So I'm working on getting everything up and running. Got back on Amazon. I'll get back on Apple today, and then or yesterday, or whenever. We'll be on Apple soon. If you don't see us on there yet, we'll be on Apple soon. But as always, you can find me at Spotify. You can find me at podcasters.spotify.com/TBD-podcast. And always grateful. I'm grateful for the people in my life. I'm grateful for the listeners that I have. I'm grateful for the ability to do what I do. And I hope you're having a great week. I hope you have a great weekend. Remember to live for the moment. Remember to connect with people that you love. And in the process, you can probably find your purpose to combat your anxiety. And you can probably cure your anxiety to help combat your grief. But obviously, it takes time. It takes effort. And all the power to you, all the good vibes, all the love. Take care, be blessed, and have a good one.